Hilchis Matnos Aniyim Perek Chamishi. So until now we were learning about the different Matnos Aniyim in a Soda. There's Peya, and there's Leket, and there's Peret, and there's Oileles. That's Oileles, a special din in a Kerem. And Peret is also a special din in a Kerem. And then there's a din of Shikha, which that's this Perek is going to deal with the halachas of Shikha. Perek Chamishi. Ha'omer sheshakhu pe'elim v'lei shokchi balasoder, or shokchi balasoder v'lei shokchu pe'elim, or shokchu elu ve'elu, and lepeil v'hoyu sham acherim even v'rei neson be'ez sheshakchu, is eina shikha, ad shishkechu kol odom. So the din of shikha means that it should be completely forgotten. Sai the pe'elim forgot it, sai the balabayis forgot it. Now normally in a soda there's only the pe'elim and the balabayis. But there could be a metzias of people passing by the soda, and they see the oimer, even though the pe'elim and the balabais are forgetting it. So that din is also that if others, Avrim, were Avrim v'rein esam, while the pe'elim and the balabais were shakhu, so in such a case it's not shikha. It has to be v'shachachta, it's completely shachoch. The vafilo oimer hatomun, oimer was tomun bekarka, and as you were matman, the oimer in the karka. So originally you put it there, and then you forgot where you were matman it is im nishkach is a reza shikha. So an oimer, in order for it to be shikha, it has to be completely shachuach, aside from the pelim, aside from the balawais, and aside even from the evim v'shavim, and an oimer which was taman bekarka. That's also there's a din of shikha on that oimer. Halacha beis haya balasoda ba'ir. The gears over here says v'shakhu, but it's fixed to say v'shakhu, that eventually he forgot it, is hareza shikha. So in other words, originally when he remembered, the pe'elim forgot. The Lashna Gemara is le'yehi shikha. That's the Lashna Braisa. Yenei adi shapelim shakhu eimish mokum pleni, and he's saying le'yehi shikha. The Rambam doesn't bring that Lashon. And lepeil at the end it was shakha, he also forgot it. So the din is areza shikha, because at this point in time it was shakhu, sai pelim, sai balabais. However, v'imhoya b'soda, if the same story happened to Soda, v'amar came, knows he's saying, I know the pelim forgot it, and he's saying that he remembers it. So he remembered it while the pelim forgot it, and then eventually v'shakhe, and then again he forgot it, is eina shikha. Why? Sha'ashachuach mi kari b'soda hu hashikha. In order for shikha to be shikha b'soda, it has to be shachuach mi'ikari. Avul be'ir, afilu zocher, l'bseif shachuach, is also areza shikha. Shenema v'shachachta emer basoda, v'lei be'ir, so we're learning out that basoda it has to be shachuach mi'ikari. But by ear, even if it's zocher, l'bseif shachuach, it's also shikha. Now, the pashtus, in the Gemara, this din is brought down to prove this yisod, that a chotzer she'ena mishtameres, you're only kaina when you're oimed b'tzat sodeu. That's what the Gemara uses this brisa to prove this is din b'negei hilchas chotzer, that a chotzer she'enu mishtameres, you could only be kaina with a chotzer she'enu mishtameres if you aim at the tzat sodeh. So the way the Rishonim say pshat, what's the raya of this brisa? Pshat is like this: that when a person knows when the poelim were started, it's a chidush, a davar mechudesh. When the poelim, although the din is that shikha is not chal until sai the poelim and sai the balabayis was shecheach. But once the pe'elim start being shecheach, it's already started the process of shikha. And since it's shaykh, the process of shikha, so therefore it's like ki'ilu, the lashon of the Ran is that it's ki'ilu like it's hefker. And memela, at that point in time, the balabais could be zeichen it. So memela, when he finds himself in the soda, and he says that the pe'elim forgot it, and he's remembering it, so since the pe'elim forgot it, the process of shikha began. Once the process of shikha began, it's like hefker. And now, since he's oimed b'tzat sodeu, and he could be koina this oimer, which is about to become shikha, and so, but it's already started the process of shikha. So at that point in time, he's koina it, and memela he's preventing from the process of shikha to eventually happen because he was koina it while it was in the middle of that process. Masheik and be'ir, since he's not an oimed b'tzat sodeu, so the fact that he remember it doesn't mean anything. There's no ma'aseh kinyan, and since there's no ma'aseh kinyan, so therefore, eventually, when he forgets, it's considered shikha because the pe'elim forgot it. Now he forgot it, so Mela goes into together of a name of shishakul pe'elim ubalabais. It's in the Rambam it doesn't say all this. The pashtus in the Rambam it doesn't say it. The Rambam is just saying somewhere or another din that in the Sod there has to be Shechuach Mikari. And in the ear, even Zocher, L'Bseif Shechuach, is also Shikha. And the Rambam just brings the pasuk because it says V'shachachta Eimer Basod V'lei Be'ir. In the Gemara, they use this pasuk, this whole limud, to teach us this yisod that a chotzer she'enim mishtameres, you have to be Eimer B'tzad Sodei. Halacha Gimel. Amdu hu aniyim b'fanav. The reason why he forgot this Eimer is because they were blocking his view. The aniyim were standing, and really he wasn't able to see the Eimer. Oy chipur b'kash, they covered it with kash, and v'uzecher is a kash. The kash he sees, but he doesn't see the Eimer which is under the kash because he doesn't know about it. Oy, another situation is, shehirzik bei lehilicha le'ir, he picked up this Eimer, almanas, to bring it to the city, and lepeil v'hiniche basada v'shokhe, he put it down in the field, the vile, put it down in the field, and then he forgot it. So in all these three cases, Sai in Amdu Aniyim B'Fonav, and Sai in the case of Chipur B'Kash, and he was Zecher Akash. So in all these cases, and in the third case where he was Higbiyeh Lahilicha Le'ir, and Lepeli was in Nichi Basada and then Shokhe, in all these cases is Eini Shikha. Aval, in Notli Memokim Lemokim, if he picked it up in the field, but he wasn't intending on bringing it Le'ir, he was just moving it, transporting it in the Sada itself. Is Aval Pi She'inichi Samach Legapa Eile Godish. So the Chur, it's a place where he could remember where it is. He put it next to the wall, or next to the Godish, Eile Boker, Eile Kelim, and then V'Shokhe. So he put it in a specific place, but nevertheless, Lepel, he forgot it, and Harez is Shikha. No, there was, when he picks it up, Amanas, to take it to the ear, it's keel like he took it already. It's already his, and then the idea of Shikha doesn't apply to him. Halacha Dalet. Notel Oimer Lahilicha Le'ir. And then that din is that Oimer is already not Shachas Shikha. And then he went ahead, V'hiniche al Gabi Chaveri, he put this Oimer on top of another Oimer, and V'shachach Hashneim. So the top Oimer for sure is not Shikha, because Lepel, he was already Higbiyah Lavia Le'ir. The question is, what's with the second Oimer? So as I say, Im Zocher Elyon, Kedem Shiv Gabei, if he remembers about the Elyon. Because he doesn't have to meet these two to remind himself. He remembers the Elyon even before he went ahead and saw them. So Mele comes out that the Elyon is not really forgotten. So then is Eina Tachten Shikha. The Tachten is not Shikha. Why? Because the Tachten doesn't remember the Tachten because it's covered by the Elyon. So just like the story before by the Kash, when it was Chipul B'Kash. So if we remember the Kash, so even though he didn't remember the Oimer, but Lepel, the reason why he didn't remember the Oimer is because it was covered by Kash, but the Kash he did remember. So in Mele, it's considered Zocher. When you remember what's covering the Oimer, that's called Zocher. So over here also, you remember the top Oimer, which is covering the bottom Oimer. So since you remembered that, so that's not called Shikha. However, Einatachn Shikha, V'im Lav, but if you didn't remember the top one, so then is Atachn Shikha. The top one is not going to be Shikha because Lepel, since you took it already. Amanas lo yilicha le'ir, it's already not together Shikha. Mashenk in the bottom, since you don't remember the top either, so you can't say I don't remember the bottom because it's covered by the top. You don't remember the top either. So Mele both, so the Tachten goes into a gather of Shikha. Halacha Hey. Ofu amorav beruach chazaka, l'teich stei chaveri. A very strong wind came and blew all the bundles into someone else's field, and Lepel, he was collecting it from the other person's field. V'shachach sham eimer, in that other person's field, he forgot an eimer. So the din is eina shikha, that's not called shikha. Shnamar, ktsircha bisodecha. That the din of ktsircha is only bisodecha. And memela over here, it's not bisodecha. Aval and pizer heimorim b'teich sodeo. Lepel, it blew the heimorim in the bundles in your own field. And it spread them out. And lepel v'shachach, knows you had the original place where you put them. That could be you would have remembered them. But lepel, the circumstances that the wind blew it, now they're spread all over the place of your field. And now you forgot one of them. So lepel is arizu shikha, kosof kosof. It's called ktsircha bisadecha. It's considered your kotzer in your field. It's your kotzer in your field. Halacha vov. Now we're dealing, a person is gathering the bundles. So we'll assume, let's say, there's bundles were set out on the rows. In other words, let's say that there was the rows of where the tfuah grew, and over there they cut the tfuah, and then they made bundles. And then the bundles were also set up in rows. So he says as a aneitel eimer rishon v'sheni u'shlishi. You took the first, second, and third bundle. And then v'shachach haravi, sorry, you kept on walking, and you forgot to take the fourth bundle. is Imhoyisham Shishi, if there's still a sixth. So which means there's still another 3 bundles. In other words, you forgot the Revi, plus the Chamishi and Shishi. So now the din is that Bechlal, Shikha is not Chal on 3 bundles. Shikha is only Chal on either 1 bundle or 2 bundles. So Im Hayisham Shishi, so this Revi is really part of a group of 3. Is Ein Revi Shikha, the Revi can go into the gather of Shikha because it would be a Shikha as part of a group of 3. Achi Yitla Chamishi. Once you take the Chamishi, so now there's only 2 left. So then the Revi could have a din of Shikha. However, if originally there was only 5, so in Mela, so there's no 3 left. When you wait, in other words, you pass the Revi, and you wait long enough that you're able to take the Chamishi, and Lepel, you already didn't take the Revi, so then as a Revi Shikha means you forgot the Revi, and there's only the Revi, and there's only the Chamishi left, so it's not considered 1 out of 3, and therefore it is considered Shikha. So notice, there's a din if you forget 3, so that's not Shikha. That we're going to learn later. The Chiddush is that you only forgot 1. And Lepel, this 1 you forgot. You didn't forget all 3. But since this 1 is part of a group of 3, that's not called Shikha, because that 1 is still a part of a group of 3. Only when you take 1 of the 3, so Mele it comes out that you're forgetting 1, which is only a group of 2, so then it's considered Shikha. So in other words, you can't have Shikha on something which is 1, which is out of a group of 3, and they're part of the group together. That's the what comes out here. Halacha Zayin. Hoyu Lashon the Rambam is Shnei Imorim Uruvavim, but they fixed the Meiser Keach, the Radvaz. They changed the gears to Soda Shamoreha Mi'urvavim. Because you don't have each Omer in its separate place. All the Imorim are all mixed together. They're all together with each other, haphazardly together. V'shachach echad meham is any shikha. Sheyitl kol tzvuvesa. Even if you got 1, but since they're all part of one group, so in Mela, that's not called shikha. When you forget 1, which is part of a group, that's not called forgotten. Unless that 1 is isolated. It has to be isolated that you took everything around it. So in Mela Yitaka, that's only a 1. You can't forget 1 of a group. You can only forget 1 that's 1. Or 1 or 2 you could forget also, but you can't forget 1 out of a group of 3, or even certainly more. So in Mela, in order to have a din shikha, there has to be an isolated oimer, and you forgot it. Haluf is like wild onions. Vashum is garlic. Vaptzolim and regular onions ukiyetzaben. Afal pishem tmunim ba'aretz, they're growing in the ground. Is yeshlem shikha. That's called also shikha. As you're gathering them from the ground. Before we learn Tamun is Shikha. So Aldera said this is also Shikha. This is called Shikha. Now Hakoitzer Balayla, someone that's cutting at night, he's harvesting at night. And Lepel V'Shachach Kama, he forgot to cut. We're soon going to learn that the din of Shikha is not only on bundles that were already cut and piled together, but it could also be on a Kama if you forgot to cut a certain area in the field. Now you're harvesting at night, and you forgot a certain area to harvest. Oy she'imer balayla, you were gathering piles at night, and v'shachach emer, and you forgot a bundle. Or v'chein asuma sheshachach, someone that's blind, and he was shachach. So there's an excuse for why they were shachach. The shaila is, do we consider that a shikha? The answer is yeah, yeshlem shikha. That's called shikha. In other words, if you took upon yourself to go ahead and harvest at night, so it means you're going to be careful. So that's the so you're harvesting at night, or you're harvesting. Or you're gathering bundles at night, or even though the person is blind, he's going ahead and doing he's doing whatever he's doing, either harvesting or gathering the bundles. So Mela, if Lepel the shikha, the rules of shikha apply to them as well. Knows the intent was l'chatchila. I'm not really harvesting. I'm just harvesting the bigger parts, or and knows l'chatchila. The intent was I'm not really taking everything. I'm only taking the larger parts. So then ain't shikha, because he didn't forget anything. In other words, he went out to take the larger parts, and the intent was that he's going to leave other parts. Now v'chola eimer hareni ketzer almanas shal masha nishichech and niyeter. So in other words, the person makes he says that I'm really, whatever I'm doing right now, I'm not really doing it completely. I'm doing it, and I'm going to do it again. So in other words, just like we're saying over here, that if a person is a summa, and he's taking only the gas, so that's considered, that's not shikha, So a person can say himself, a person can say himself also, I'm going ahead and I'm cutting, but you should know that I'm not really cutting completely, but I'm going to come back to it, and whatever is left, I'm going to come back to it. So, like, I'm not doing a very thorough job, but that's not really going to take away the din of shikha. That's what the Rambam is saying. So Yeshli Shikha Shkol Hamasna Mashakasa B'Teirat No Yibotel. In other words, he can't change the halacha. The halacha is that since Lepel he's cutting and he's harvesting really in a regular way, so that's good for the din. And the fact that he's saying Kilu that he's not really harvesting in a regular way, that's not going to change this din. I mean, the Lashon Kol Hamasna Mashakasa B'Teirat normally means that I want like a psachales should be chal. It was differently than the way the Torah sets up. Mekadosh Isha Menash Shein Olav Eina, or things of that din. So Sheikh Susveina. So that's pshat. He wants a chales to be chal differently than the way Torah is making chal. Over here also, I mean that's the derech hamun is like being moider a little bit on that lashon. So over here also, I'm harvesting, and I don't want this harvest should be called a harvest. That's the pshat. I'm harvesting, but I don't want the harvest should be called a harvest. The Torah says, yeah, if you're harvesting and you forget, so whatever is left is considered shikha, and what you're making up is not going to change anything. Halacha tes. Tvua shekotzra achel nigmara, and the purpose was lahachila lebehema. And as a result of that, he made small bundles. When you meichel to a behema, you make smaller bundles. V'cheinem kotzra agudis ktanis, v'le'osamorim, you made small bundles, not because you're being meichel lebehema, because you're making small bundles. You didn't make the normal size bundles. V'chein hashumim v'aptzolim shetol shem agudis ktanis. Again, you pulled them out small bundles. Li'yimachar bashuk v'li'osim amorim lahamid mehem geirim. And you didn't do the normal bundles to make a geirim, to make a pile. Is the din is ein lehem shikha. These din don't have shikha. Now the ma'is is other Rishonim learn that this din of kotzra agudis ktanis means you're making small bundles. And your intent is to eventually make larger bundles. So Memela, it's not called Gemar Malacha, because over here you're making small bundles. Amanas to make eventually large bundles. But in the Rambam, the Pashtus Hadvarim is it means that even you have no intention of making large bundles. But nevertheless, these small bundles that they don't go into the Geder v'shachach ta'omer basoda. Now the question is, what's a large bundle and what's a small bundle? The Rambam doesn't say a shir. The Derech Hamuna suggests that the pshat is the normal size bundles, or what you normally make bundles. That's called an omer, and anything smaller than that would go into the gather of agudis ktanis. That would go into the gather of agudis ktanis, and then the din is, since it's agudis ktanis, smaller than the normal amount, so therefore it doesn't have a din of an omer. Memela, the din of shikha doesn't apply. Halacha yud hakoitzer shehischel liktzer miresh ashura. He started cutting. And v'shochach lefonov ulachrov. Because he continued cutting, and he forgot. He didn't think, and he kept on walking, and he didn't cut. So now there's some things that he didn't cut behind him, and he's also forgotten. In other words, he finished cutting, and he didn't cut the entire shura, and he went back to another shura. So he never really finished the shura. So he forgot part of it that was behind him, and part of it that was in front of him. So the din is shel akruch shikha. What he forgot behind him is shikha. Aber shelefonav ain't a shikha. What he forgot to collect in front of him, so that's not called shikha. Shikha is only, you're not allowed to go back to take what you forgot, which was behind you. Mashenkin over here, since he forgot something that was in front of him, that's not called shikha. Shnema leisoshev lekakha. So we learn out, ain't a shikha, it's not called the din of shikha. At sheyavrim mimenu, he passed it, v'yanichenu la'achrav, and he left it behind him. If it's a question of returning to where he was originally, it's shikha. He's not returning to where he originally was. He never went to the end of the shura because he forgot. He didn't chapsach that there's more at the end of the shura. Somewhere or another, it's a fatrach. And Memela, he didn't chapsach that there's something at the end of the shura. And such a case, there's not b'chinas baltoshev. And Memela, he could go and finish that shura. That was talking about there's one person that's doing the shura, and he missed Sailafonov and Sailachrov. Halacha Yudalef. Shnayim she'eschilu liktzer mi'amtza shura. Let's say we have a shura. We'll say the shura is from 1 to 20. And two people started cutting the shura. One is cutting from 11 to 20, and the other one is cutting from 10 to 1. And they're both facing in opposite directions. He's facing by 11 towards the 20, and he's facing by the 10 towards the 1. Shnayim she'eschilu liktzir me'emtza ashura, zeh ponav l'tzofim, v'zeh ponav l'dorim. And v'shokchu lifneim ulachreim. They forgot sai lifneim, sai lachreim. Now normally, lifneim is not shikha. Lachreim is always shikha. But lifneim l'chura is not shikha. So we say that over here, shalifneim is yes shikha. Here's the chidush, that even shalifneim is shikha, even though l'chura it's only lifneim. Mipnei shekol echad mehem, zeh shalifanav hu lacherim shel chaveri. So we look at these two people as being like one entity, and memela is einach hinami. If we're looking at the person that's, let's say, cutting from 10 to 1, and let's say he missed 3. He missed the lefanav, he missed 2 and 1. So l'chura, as far as he's concerned, it's lefanav. L'chura is no problem. But as far as the other person that's going from 11 to 20, it's lacherov. And since it's lacherov, so therefore it's considered shikha. I mean, agam l'chura, you have to understand. The whole problem of lacherov, because it's le'soshev l'kachte. He was there already, and it's le'soshev l'kachte. Over here we're talking about lefanav. Lefanav, the person that was going in that direction was never there, and the person that by him it's lacherov certainly wasn't there, because he was never there in the first place. So even if you're going to say he's together with the other person, but lepel, the fact that it's lacherov, the whole din of lacherov is only mitzad le'soshev l'kachte. You have to understand what's the havon of this halacha. But I'll call upon that's the halacha. The halacha is the shnayim she'eschilu l'nachama. Shnayim she'eschilu likzer be'amtza ashura. Zeh ponav l'tzofim, zeh ponav l'dorim. V'shokchu lifneim ulachreim. Eshe lifneim shikha. So lachreim is about the shikha, because by him it's l'soshev l'kachte. But lifneim is also shikha. Mipnei shekol echad mehem zeh shelefanov hu lacherev shel chaveri. Now that's din number 1. Now another din. For oimer sheshokchu lachreim b'shmokim she'eschilu mimenu. That oimer, which was the middle oimer in between where this one started and the other one started, ein shikha mipnei shu me'urev im ashuris shemin hamizrach l'mayrev. That's the perpendicular to the shura which they're doing. V'hein mechichan olav she'ein shechuach. V'chein hashuris shel amorim. Shepino eisen legorim, you're having shura shel amorim. Because you have shura rows of piles, and you bring it to the goyim. V'hischilu shnayim emtza shura, and v'shokchu eimer be'emtza ben achoreya. In the same case, over there we're talking about that the person left part of the kama. Over here we're saying they left one of the bundles. Is also in a shikha. Mipnei shehu be'emtza shura shemin mizrach l'mayrev she'adayin le'yeschilu ba. Because we look at this one that they forgot as that being part of the row, as if there's like a T, so to speak. It's part of the row that's going in a mizrach l'mayrev, which is perpendicular to the row that they were doing. She'adayin le'yeschilu ba. V'hi muchachas olav she'ein shechuach. So it's a special din that oimer, which neither of them started, neither of them did, neither of them passed, that oimer is not considered shikha because it's considered part of the road that's going in mizrach l'mayrev. Halacha Yud Beis. The nukud of the halacha is that when you forget a bundle, that's only when you're bringing the bundles to a place where it's either the place where you're going to thresh them, which is, so to speak, the final place, or the place where it's the final gathering place, where from there you're going to take it to the threshing floor. Masha'inkin, if you're like in the middle of gathering and you're gathering small bundles and then you're gathering from one area to another area, so it's like all in the middle of the process, then the din of shikha doesn't apply. It touches. Halacha Yud Beis. HaKoitzer, someone that harvested it. The ilaim alumis, and he made bundles. And then upino ha'alumis, he moved those bundles, ve'enan nikroim imorim, mimakim zel u'makim acher, from one place to another place in the field. U'mimakim hasheni l'makim hashlishi, and then from the second place to a third place. U'makim hashlishi l'geirin, and eventually from the third place, he's bringing it to the geirin, to the threshing floor. And v'shachach ha'omer b'shah shepina mimakim l'makim, and in one of these stops, he forgot an omer, so it depends. Im pina ha'imorim, l'makim shu gmar malacha v'shachcha, if he forgot it. In other words, he was on his way to bring it to a place which is called the Gemar Malacha, which the Rambam is going to tie chis and Halacha Yud Gimel what Gemar Malacha is. He's bringing it to a place where that would be called the Gemar Malacha. So then, at that point in time, Yesh Shikha. He's bringing it from point C to point D, and D is the Gemar Malacha. So if he forgets something in point C, that would be called Gemar Shikha. And then, since it's called Shikha, so therefore, if he's going to bring it from point D to point E, So again, ein l'shikha, because since there was already a din shikha from the to when he was bringing it to the place of the Gmar Malacha, even though that place was no longer, wasn't yet the Geirin, as we'll soon say what Gmar Malacha is. So now you can't have shikha twice. There's no like two types of moving which would both constitute shikha. Shikha would be the time where you're bringing it to the place of the Gmar Malacha. That would be shikha. Once you brought it to that place, and now you're bringing it from the place of the Gmar Malacha to the Geirin, so even though you forgot it before you bringing it to the Geirin, that's not called shikha. However, you bring it from point A to point B, and then from point B you're going to bring it to point C. In other words, you're gathering different gatherings, and the shachach ain't a shikha. When you bring it from a place which is not Gmar Malacha, and then you're bringing it to the Geirin, to the place where you're going to thresh, yesh li shikha. So the Nekudas Advarim is you could only have shikha, there's only one forgetting that could be shikha. Now, normally, if you're bringing it to the place where it's the Gmar Malacha, that would be one possibility of shikha, or you're bringing it to the place which is the Geirin, which where you're going to do the threshing, is another possibility of shikha. The halacha yud gimel ezu makim shu Gmar Malacha, ze makim shedaite lekabetz kol ha'imorim sham v'lo sham. Either this is the place where you're gathering all the bundles, and there's where you're going to do the threshing. Or this is the place where you're gathering all the bundles, and you're not going to actually do the threshing, but over here you have everything together. And that would also be the Gemar Malacha, where the place where you finally have everything put together. It's like you make small piles here, and other small piles here, and then you start gathering. So when you come to the place where over here all the piles were already gathered together, and from here they'll be taken to the Geirin. So at this point here, that's called the Gemar Malacha. So the last bringing, before you bring to the place of the Gemar Malacha, that's where Shikha is. And that would Shikha is, and therefore since that's Shikha, so even though from here you're going to bring it to the Geirin, and sometimes when you bring it, the way to the Geirin would be called Gemar Malacha, but that would be called Shikha. That's only, in other words, there could be two situations. You have it to situations where you gather everything in one place, and now you have everything gathered, and now from here you're gathering everything to the Geirin. You're bringing everything to the Geirin. So over here, the place where you gathered everything, that's called the Gemar Malacha, and bringing it to that area, the last, so to speak, place where you brought it before you brought it to the area of the Gemar Malacha, that's called Shikha. You forgot to bring it to the Gemar Malacha, the last stop before the Gemar Malacha, that's called Shikha. Now, once it already came to the Gemar Malacha, and you forgot to bring it from the place of the Gemar Malacha to the Geirin, that wouldn't be called Shikha. And there would be another situation where you bring everything to the Geirin. Notice the last stop is the Geirin, and that's the place where everything is being gathered. So the Geirin and the place where everything is being gathered is one of the same. So the last stop before bringing it to the Geirin, so bringing it from that last stop until the Geirin, that's where Shikha would be. If you forgot to bring it to the Geirin, so that would be Shikha. So again, either you forgot to bring it to the place where they're all being gathered, or you forgot to bring it to the Geirin. But if you forgot to bring it to the place where they're all being gathered, is from there to the Geirin is not Shikha. Okay. Yeah. Umakim, that's a place that's called the Gemar Malacha. Umakim shedaiti lekabes kol imorim v'lodu sheisim sham eleilichem sham l'makim goder shu aged. When we came she'enig Gemar Malacha, what's the fact she'amakim she'enig Gemar Malacha? U'amakim shemekatzim be'hamorim kedei lasis me'malumis gdelis kedei leilichem l'makim acher. Over here, you're still in the middle of the work. You're bringing the small bundles here, and over here you're going to make bigger bundles, and from the bigger bundles you're going to bring it all together into another area. Halacha Yudalit. Shtei kriches hamuvdal izu mizu. If you have two bundles which are separated one from the other, certainly if they're not separated, but if they're separated one from the other, they still constitute that's shikha. However, v'shalish ain't a shikha. If you have three bundles that you forget, and the three separate bundles, so then it's ain't a shikha. Shnei imorim. No, kriches would be smaller bundles, and imorim is larger bundles. Shnei imorim hamuvdalim zamizeh. If you have two large bundles, but they're separated one from the other, so it's still a shikha. However, ushleisha ain't on shikha. If they're three, then they're not shikha. So the Nekudas Advarim is that in order to be shikha, it's only two. It's like we had similar by leket. that if 2 fall down, that's called leket. If 3 fall down, it's not leket. By shikha, there's a similar din. If you forgot 2 bundles together, we're talking about 2 bundles in the same area. In other words, you could forget the 3 bundles in different parts of the field. That wouldn't be not shikha. But over here, if you have 3 bundles together and you forget all 3 of them, that's not called shikha. But if you have 2 bundles that are separated from each other and you forget the 2 of them, that would be shikha. Now the same thing, shnei tzibur zeisim v'charuvim amuvdolm zamizeh. You have 2 piles of olives or boxer that are carob that are separated from the other is shikha. U'shleisha ain't a shikha. Shnei hutznei pishton. If you have 2 piles of flax, shikha. U'shleisha ain't shikha. But if the 3 of them, there's no shikha. And because the Mishnah says that it's talking about that they were sown to eat. In other words, if you sow, the purpose was for the seeds to be eaten of these flax seeds. So then they go into the gather of pishtam. If they're being used for other purposes, but not for food, so then they're not in the category of shikha. Shtei kfanim, if you have 2 vines, v'chein b'sh'ari ilonis, you have shnayim amuvdolim zamizeh, 2 separate trees, is shikha. U'shleisha ain't a shikha. Shnamel al-oni v'lager taziv oisam. Oisam is lashon rabin. Afilo ha'yishnayim. And it says la'oni v'lager, actually. It says la'oni and lager. So memela afilo ha'yishnayim, echad la'oni v'echad lager. So memela we learn out that if you have 2 things that are left over, so that goes into the gather of shikha. So that's the number 1. In order to be shikha, it has to be the maximum 2. 3 is not shikha. Halacha Yud Zayin. Now the question is also, what's the size of the shikha? Now hoyu kol ha'imorim shel kav kav. All the bundles were each one a kav. Ve'echot shel arba kav. And one bundle was 4 times as big as the other ones, 4 kavim. And v'shokhe, you forgot the one with 4 kavim, is still as ariza shikha. However, yeser alabar knows it's more than 4 times of the regular bundles, so then it's ain't a shikha. That doesn't go into the gather of shikra. So Mamela is considered like a davar choshev and a davar mesuyim, just like we're going to learn later when it's something which you obviously will remember. So that doesn't go into the gather of shikha. So we neman that something which is more than 4 times as much as the regular bundles is not something which you really forget. And even if you forgot it momentarily, but it's not really called a forgetting, you'll certainly remind yourself right away. V'chein, im hoyu shel shnei kabim, if the normal bundles were 2 kabim each, and the echad was yeser al shmeina kabim, and one of them was more than 8 kabim, which means more than 4 times the size, so it's ein shikha, it's nachama. If you forget a bundle, it's shikha, even if the bundle is larger than the regular bundles, as long as it's not more than 4 times the regular bundles. But if it was more than 4 times the regular bundles, so then it doesn't go into shikha. Now there's another din, ha'omer, sheyesh b'sosayim v'shokhe. If you have a pile or a bundle that has the size of 2 saw, sosayim 2 saw, is ein shikha. It makes no difference, even if all the bundles are that size. Earlier we were talking about the size of the bundle that you forgot in relation to the other bundles which you didn't forget. Here we're talking about even if all the bundles were sosayim. Ha'omer sheyesh b'sosayim v'shokhe ein shikha. Shenema v'shachachta oimer basada. Oimer means a bunch, a bundle of a velei gadish, not a gadish, which is a whole pile. Aval pi shekulam sosayim, even though all the piles are 2 saw each, nevertheless, forgetting a pile of 2 saw each is not considered shikha. Now, shokach shnei oimrim, you forgot 2 bundles, is aval pi sheyesh b'shneim sosayim, the 2 together make up a sosayim, but each one is only a saw, is arei l'shikha. Not only if they were both sosayim, but even if they were both more than sosayim. You can have a hechatimtza that each bundle is less than sosayim, and together they just be not much less than 4 saw. But nevertheless, since each one is less than sosayim, so therefore it's chal shikha, and since the two together, you can have 2 bundles together, it'll be shikha, so you can have twice as much as something which is a little less than sosayim. But that's only on the condition that they're not more than 4 times greater of the regular bundle. If they would be more than 4 times greater than the regular bundle, so again, they wouldn't go into the gather of shikha. Halacha yutes, karma sheyesh b'sosayim v'shokha in a shikha. Now the shikha could be not only in the imorim, but also in the karma. And just like by the Imarim, you say that if you forgot a bundle that or a pile that was too saw, the size was too saw, that doesn't go into the shikha. So al derech zeh, if you forgot a comma, which the size is too saw, is also not shikha. However, ein bo sasayim, if they don't actually have sasayim, now they have stalks. There's stalks, and the stalks are still thin. Is reina sashibola madakas. You take a look at those thin stalks. Ki'ilu him briyes va'arukes, as if try to imagine if they would be thicker, healthy, thick stalks, and long ones. And vesashdufes, and if you have stalks which the wind knocked out a lot of the grain, is ki'ilu him layers, just to imagine that they were full. Because you're taking a look at this comma, you're saying, well, if this comma, the stalks, instead of being thin, would be thick, instead of being short, they would be tall, and instead of being knocked out, they would be full, and then it would be sasayim v'shakhein shikha. So notice, you can't have shikha on a comma if that comma potentially would have made beisah. So even though bepel mamish, this comma doesn't have beisah because the stalks are thin, the stalks are short, and maybe some of them are knocked out, but since there's a potential that this level of comma would have two saw, so therefore it doesn't go into the category of shikha. Now, as we said, there's a shikha which is that you forget a bundle, and you could also forget a comma. Now, shochach saw tvua akura, you forgot a saw of tvua which was cut off, it was detached from the ground, it was already harvested. This saw she'ena akura, and another saw which was still attached to the ground, was still a comma, is eina mitztarfim. The now mitztarfim, we're not going to say that since the din is that there's no shikha by sosayim. So over here you have a sosayim, you have a saw of comma and a saw of an aimer, and they're next to each other. So we say no, since they're two separate types of shikha, this is a shikha of an aimer and this is shikha of a comma. So therefore shneim shikha, as if you forgot about them separately. V'chein b'shum u'b'ptzolim u'b'peiros ilon, the same din would apply. He said the din by tvua. The same din would apply by shum. Shum is garlic or onions or peiros ilon. Im shachach miktzason dekarka u'miktzason tolish. Part of it was already cut off the tree, and part of it was tolish, or cut off the ground. U'b'shneim sasayim, together they're a sasayim. Is eina mitztarfim, we don't look at it as really a sasayim, and therefore l'shneim shikha. If they would be mitztaref, so then they would go into the category that the sasayim is not shikha. But since they're not mitztaref, so therefore there's the din shikha. Halacha chafal. Hashicheach oimer b'tzad hakama she'ein shchucha. There's an oimer, a bundle of wheat that you forgot, but it's next to a comma wheat that was still standing that you still have to cut, that you didn't forget. So Mamela, you're going to remember it. So you're going to go back to, you remember it, and you're going to go back to cut it. And once you go back to cut it, you're obviously going to see the Eimer HaShechuach. So Mamela, Shecheach Eimer B'tzad HaKama She'ein Shchucha is Ein Shikha. That's not called Shikha. Shenamar Ki Sikser V'Shachachta Eimer. So we learn now, Eimer She'is V'Vesav Kotzer, an Eimer which around it is all cut. So then it's shikha. Avol eimer she's v'veisav kama. If you have a bundle of wheat that you forgot, but it's next to, around it, there's a wheat that's standing that wasn't cut yet, is eina shikha. So the din is again that a kama, which is eina shikha, is matzel the eimer which you had shikha. And v'chein im shachach kama mitzad kama she'eina shchucha. In other words, you have a kama which you remember, and then there's another comma which you don't remember, and the two commas are next to each other. You remember that you have a little this corner that you still have to cut, and then there's another area which you also have to cut, but that you forgot. So the din is just like the comma is matzel, the oimer, which is shchucha. The comma has, that's eina shchucha, is matzel, the oimer ashchucha. So in the same way, the comma, which is eina shchucha, is matzel, the other part of the comma, which was shchucha. V'chein shachach comma b'tzad comma she'eina shchucha. Afilu kelechecha, there's only one stalk that you remember you still have to cut, and next to it there's a lot of stuff that you forgot that you have to cut. Is arezu matzelis ashchucha, and v'yemutu lekachta, and then you'll be allowed to cut even the part that you forgot. Avol im shochach oimeri kama b'tzad oimer she'ein shochach. Not talking about a kama she'ein shochach. B'tzad oimer she'ein shochach, you forgot one oimer, you forgot one bundle, and it's next to a bundle which you remember. Or you forgot a comma, and that comma No, there's uncut tvua, and that comer is next to a bundle which you didn't forget. Even if the bundle that you didn't forget is a very large bundle that has sosayim, is nevertheless eini matzul. That's not going to be matzul, the part that you did forget. Barei hashechuach la'aniyim, and the shechuach is la'aniyim. So b'kitzur, the din is that your kama, which is eini shechuach, is matzul say your oimer shechuach and say your kama shechuach. Masha'inkin an oimer she'eini shechuach is not matzul, not a oimer shechuach and not hakama shechuach. Now there's another din. Ein kamas chaverei matzeles al emer shalei. Someone else has a kama and he's going to cut it, and you forgot your emers, and it's next to that person's kama, so that person's kama can't save your emer. The ein kamach seirim matzeles al emer chitim. I'm sorry, ein kama seirim. A kama of seirim can't be matzel a emer of chitim. So if you have an emer next to a kama, normally it's matzel. But that's only if they're both the same min. Masha'inkin, if the oimer is made out of chitim, and the kam is made out of se'irim, so they're not matzah. Achetia hakama mimin oimer. Now we said that if you forgot a pile or a bundle that was two sasayim, so then that's not considered shikha. That's only if you forgot the food, you forgot the bundle of tvua, or you forgot the pile of food. However, hashecheach ilon bein hailonis, if you forgot a tree, is afila hoya bekama soim peiros, even though the tree has many soim peiros, a sheshachach shnei ilonis is arein shikha shleisha in a shikha. So when we're dealing with a tree over there's no shear of how much saw the tree has. And since you're forgetting the tree, so the tree is considered one tree, and the fact that the tree happens to have many saw of peiros is irrelevant. If you forget a pile of tvua, so then we say if it has sosayim, that's not shikha. Masha'inkin, if you forget a tree, so then the fact that it has a lot of it has sosayim of peiros or more than sosayim is not menshana. That's only talking about when you forgot the tree. That's when you forgot the tree. Masha'inkin, if you started cutting the tree, like the Rambam would say, and you'll forget peiros on the tree, so then again, that's like forgetting a kama, and then the din is again that if there's sosayim, so then it's not shikha, like the Rambam will say b'hemshach. B'medvar mamurim, that forgetting a tree, Allah chav gimel. B'medvar mamurim, that forgetting a tree is considered shikha. That's be'ilon she'ena yadua meforsim, either b'mokim, kigein shehoyim eimet b'tzad hagas, b'tzad hapirtz. If you have an ilon which has a very distinct place, it's standing next to the gas, the place where you press the wine, b'tzad hapirtz, or next to an opening in the wall of around the vineyard. B'maisav, there's something special about this tree. Kigein shoyaisis esim harbi, was a tree that made a lot of olives. B'shmei was it had a special name. Kigein shoyali shem yadua. Kigein zayis hanatoifa. It's a zayis which is called hanatoifa ben hazesim. Why is it called the toifa? The toifa means it drips. Shul native shemen harbi. It constantly drips a lot of oil because its shemen are saturated with oil, and therefore there's always oil dripping from this zayis. A ashofchani, which means it's pouring a lot of oil, or habayshani, it's like embarrassed amongst its other trees because it has less than everyone else. I'll call upon him, if we're dealing that you forgot a tree which is very distinct, either by the place where the tree is standing, or by the name that the tree has. It's either called a netoifa or shafchani or baishani. So in such a case, we say that if you forget such a tree that doesn't have any of these special inyanim, so then you can have a inyan of shikha. That's what we're saying. When do we say that you can forget a tree and that tree has a din of shikha, regardless of how big the tree may be? That's only if it doesn't have any of these three things that we just mentioned. If it had one of these three things, ain't a shikha. Which means when you forget something, and it's a possibility you'll completely forget it, so that's called shikha. Or something you'll forget, and you'll only be able to remember it if you actually go see it. So then that's called shikha. But such a type of tree, well, you'll certainly remember it. It's something which stands out in your mind. You'll definitely eventually remember about this tree. So that such a type of tree doesn't go into the gather of shikha. So the Rambam gave three examples. He gave an example that it was oimid b'mokim mesuyim, it was meforsim b'mokim, or it was meforsim b'maisav, it made zaysim harbe, or it had a special name. Now hoya mesuyim b'daiti. In other words, in his mind, this tree was a special tree. It didn't have a special name. It wasn't in a special place. It didn't do anything special. But in his mind, it was something was mesuyim b'daiti. He had like a special connection to this tree, or this tree meant very much to him. Is areze k'meforsim b'yado. That also has to do k'meforsim b'yado. In other words, a tree, sometimes there's nothing specific that you could really speak about this tree, but to him, this tree is very meaningful. Now, hoya emed b'tzad hadekel, if the tree was standing next to a palm tree, is hadekel mesayme. The dekel is also a simon. You know, it's a simon. We're saying before that it's a mokim. The mokim is hadekel mesayme. Hoyu shneim zayis netefa. If you have two trees and each one was a zayis netefa, was a zayis that dripped, that had specialty, is there mesayim? Is there each one is mesayim the other? Now it's not so clear because l'chura we said before that if you have one tree that's a zayis netefa, so there's no shikha. Over here, it's a psoy shneim zayis netefa. You have two trees that are zayis netefa, so they both are similar to the other, and therefore that causes that they shouldn't be shikha. Now, hoysa kol sadeu zayis netefa. If a person has his entire tree, his entire field has these type of olive trees, and v'shachach achas memishtayim is yesh l'shikha. So if a person has a regular olive, a field with olive trees, and one of them is a zayis netefa, or even two of them is a zayis netefa, like they said before, yishneim zayis netefa, so then they're considered special, and therefore there's no shikha. But if you have a whole field that's of zayis netefa, and you forgot one or two of them, so neither of them is any special in this field. So therefore it goes into together shikha. Now this din that we're saying, that if it's an ilam amforsim, there's no din shikha, means you forgot the tree. In other words, if you have a tree that's an ilam amforsim, it's a famous tree, or has a very designated name to it, or act to it, and you forgot it, so we say you'll remember about it, and therefore it's not shikha. What about if you already started harvesting this tree, and then you forgot some of the tree? If you never started cutting from this tree, but if you already started with the tree, and and part of it you forgot, and it was while you were cutting from the tree, you forgot part of it, is that is a shikha. Because over here the shikha, the tree is meforsim, but you started harvesting the tree. Over here we're talking about the fruit within the tree. The fruit within the tree, that's not meforsim, that's not more meforsim than the rest of the tree. That's only on the condition that the rest of the tree that he left over is less than susayim. Aval susayim, but if it's a susayim, ain't a shikha. Elim kein shacha kol ilim k'misha b'yanu. So in other words, we learned before that if you forget something that's more than a susayim, it's not shikha. Then we learned that if you forget a tree, even if the tree is more than susayim, it is shikha. Now we're learning that this din, that if you forget a tree that's more than susayim is shikha, is only if you forget the entire tree. So the gather of the shikha is the tree. The fact that the tree has more than susayim is irrelevant. Masha'enkin, if you didn't forget the tree, you forgot something on the tree, so kila, the tree is the field over here. It's like you forgot something on the field, on the tree. So mela, since you forgot something on the tree, so just like if you forget a pile on the field, so if it's susayim, this doesn't have it in shikha, so al derech zeh, if you forget part of the tree, and that part of the tree has susayim, so b'meila it wouldn't be shikha. So if you forget the whole tree, even though it's more than susayim, it's shikha. Masha'enkin, if you forget part of the tree, if it's part of the susayim, then it's shikha. Now derech zeh, then the fact that this tree is a special tree is also not negeh, because the negeh, the special tree, is only when you forget the tree. Halacha chafei, zayis ha'emed be'emtza hashuris levadi. You have an olive tree, and this olive tree is surrounded by 3 rows of trees. Be'emtza hashuris levadi. And the sholish shurish shel zeisim, you have 3 rows of olives. Makif nesim sholish shuches. So you have on 3 sides, let's say a hay. You have a tree in the middle of the hay, and then you have on both sides, you have on all three sides, and it could be also two trees on each side. That would also be a row of trees. You have two trees on each of the three sides, and in the middle you have an olive tree. Is afal pi she'ein b'chol shurim me'am elish zeisim, is shachach zamtzoy, since it's in the middle of these three rows of trees, which are not three rows in a row, but in those three rows that are, like we're saying, the side of a ches, shachach zamtzoy is ein shikha. Shari hashuris histiru. The shuris, in other words, the reason why you forgot it is because they were hidden by the rows that were outside of it. Why were we talking about a zayis? This din is l'chur lav dafka zayis. You're right. So therefore, this din was said by Chazal about zaysim. In other words, the Rambam is quoting this din as it's quoted in Chazal. So Mimela over there it was said zaysim. So Mimela over there also saying zaysim. Masha'inkein, the emphasis is that this din is lav dafka by zaysim, is by any tree. Halacha chavav. Ezu shikha ba'aris. Aris is when you have the vines. They're hanging over either a bed or a platform. They're hanging over a wall, and then there's a platform extending from it. And there's a mechitza and a platform extending from it. Is kol she'eni yachol livshetis yadi v'litla. In other words, if you passed by, you went into the yaris and you were taking off the fruit, and then you passed by. So when the yaris, since the vines are mixed up with each other, so therefore people are naturally very careful to make sure that they get every vine. And therefore, even if you pass by, as long as you're still able to extend your hand and still touch this aris or be able to harvest the aris, so that's not called shikha yet. Ezo shikha b'aris, kol she'en yochel livshit is yadid v'litla. In other words, you passed the area far enough that you can no longer stretch out your hand and do anything. However, when we're dealing with a regular vineyard where the vines are lying on the floor, is mishayaver min hagefn min hagfanim. As soon as you pass by the gefn and the gfanim, which means you forgot it. So that means you forgot it. And again, it's not so you don't forget it so easily, because you're going to look for it more. Mashenkin gefn and gfanim. So over there, as long as you passed it, it's considered you forgot it. Mishayaver min hagefn min hagfanim v'yishka chesa. Bidolis, if something is like hanging up a wall, or bedekel, or something, we're talking about a palm tree. Is mishiyared himanu. When is it considered that you already have shikha? So in other words, you went up onto the wall, and now when you came down, so whatever is left of there is shikha. Now there is a bedekel. You went up on the dekel, and whatever is left on it, so that's called shikha. Mishiyared himanu. Ush'ar kol ilanis and other trees is mishiyifne v'yelechlei. So these trees are talking about now when you go up the trees. Because when you're passing by the trees, so B'negeya Karen we said as soon as you passed the vineyard. B'negeya on Aris we said as not only passed, but you can no longer stretch out your hand and get it. Masha'ink and other ilanas as soon as you pass it. B'medvar mamurim that these rules applies that as soon as you pass it, it's considered shikha b'shalei hiskelbei. If you didn't start cutting and harvesting this tree, so the entire tree could be considered shikha. Aval in hiskelbei, if you started harvesting, cutting from the tree, and v'shakhe, then you forgot some of the fruits on the tree, is ein shikha at sheyifzer is called shvil. When it's considered shikha, only if you harvested the trees which were around this tree, and you didn't continue doing this tree. Since you already started doing this tree, so it's not considered you forgot the tree until you harvested all the trees around this tree, and nevertheless you're not continuing with this tree, so then this tree, the rest of the tree is called shikha. Hamafker is karmei. Person went ahead and he was mafker his entire kerem, and then the hishkim babeka, the following morning he went, v'zocha be'la'atzmei, and then he was rizoicha in this kerem, he was originally mafker, and then ubatzre, he harvested the kerem. It's lavdafka kerem, this would be a sodder as well. It's chayiv be'peret, ube'elules, ube'shikhu be'peir. And all the Matnos Aniyim of the Soda, Peret, Elules, Shikhu, Peah, he's chayiv. Shari Sodcha v'karma chanikere mipnei shehoye shalei bareu shalei. Aval im zochem and a hefke v'soda shel acherim. If someone was mafker a field, and then another person goes ahead and he's zochem and a hefker, is a reizeh potter and akel yitaka we potter. So over here there's a special din. We'll learn from a pasuk Tazev that if he himself was mafker his field, and then he himself went ahead and it was zeichem and a hefker. Agam l'chur yil taina, l'chur it was hefker. So just like if he would be zeichem and a hefker when someone else was mafker, so he would be potter. So al derezeh when he was mafker. So that's the din, the special din, that since it was originally his, and now it's his. In the middle it was hefker, so memele he's chayiv in all the matnas aniyim. However, ubenkach potter min ha-maisis. As far as maisis is concerned, that he'll be potter. K'mei sheyizbar. That we'll learn in Hilchos Maisis. But as far as Matnos Aniyim is concerned, the fact that he was mafkared, but since Lepel he was zeicher again, so therefore he's chayiv in all the Matnos Aniyim.